Originally a fabrication building for the Vermont Marble Company. And the building itself is probably 8 or 9 different buildings that were built over time. The original use as a museum in some sense started in 1933 or so, with the Vermont Marble Company using it as a showroom for visitors, architects, etc. Preservation Trust entered into agreement to acquire the collection around 2014 and set up the Vermont Marble Museum as a nonprofit board and a nonprofit organization on its own. So it's been since 2016 since it's been operated as a nonprofit museum.
One of the biggest ones, I believe, would be the Industrial Revolution, which allowed, the moving, the manipulation, the digging up, the transporting, the milling of incredibly large items like stone that a human person wouldn't be able to do themselves. They wouldn't be able to do it with horse or oxen. So having the raw materials here in the form of a quarry in this limestone that's in our Vermont mountains, and then having the Industrial Revolution, which brought the railroads right probably 12 feet from where I sit right here, just the other side of that wall, the railroad for the transporting of goods and of the product, and the need, the larger buildings, to be able to create a market for that marble. I believe it was one of the Proctors. I don't know if it was Redfield Proctor or Mortimer Proctor. One was the father, one was the son. You know what? I think it was Redfield Proctor.
I think one of the things, having mentioned that the Hems were in the wholesale business, one of the things that the Hems had going for them is that they had a deep inventory of stuff that they were selling wholesale, and so their prices for the gift shop were pretty good, and they had a stable business model that had multiple things, not just visitors. So certainly, as the museum had to shut down, so at the end of 2019, things were a little tight financially, and there was a decision to really work on strategic planning for how to upgrade the exhibits. Tours are changing, not as many bus tours these days, all of that sort of. So begin to rethink the museum. And then with pandemic, it became really clear that bus tours and other things just weren't going to be happening at all, and that opening at all in 2020 would risk using what capital was available and losing it. So the decision was made to stay closed and to work on thinking about that strategic plan and revisions and updates during the pandemic. So that's where we are. So it's been closed since the normal seasonal shutdown in October of 2019. That included the gift shop because with nobody there to do fulfillment, mail order doesn't work. So it's one of the only true company towns in Vermont. Proctor itself was created from 4 different communities that land got aggregated into creating the new municipality. And so the fact that the museum is there in that original building where all of the Proctor workers showed up is really cool. It's very unique that you have the exhibits co-located with where people did the work. And the fact that there were people from all over the world in Little Proctor, it's just amazing. And when you think about what the Vermont Marble Company did out of Proctor, just extraordinary list of buildings and monuments and graves, a huge impact all over the world. So that whole piece, sort of comes to life there on site in a way that it wouldn't anywhere else. Um, the other pieces that I think are important is that there are multiple storylines around marble in Vermont. There's the ancient storyline of the geology and what created the rock that's been so important over time. There's the immigrant community story. There's the company town and the history of the business. There's the craft of marble for architecture, and there's the art of marble for sculpture. So you've got all of these different storylines that come together in one place.
A very interesting fact, I think, is that at one point, this building, the business that took place in this building, from what I understand, the company employed 2,000 people, which is more people than the town of Proctor currently has for a population. We have about 16 or 1,700. But at one point I hear that a little patch of grass between the building and the railroad supplied a ramp for a sidewalk. And at one point when the whistle blew, enough people walked up that grassy path to either go home for lunch at noontime or go home at the end of the day. It was supposedly the most traveled sidewalk in the state of Vermont at one point. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier that is at Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. The stone for that might have come from Tennessee, somewhere a little more west. But I believe there's a photograph of that Tomb of the Unknown Soldier being shipped by railroad to Washington, D.C. And that was setting on this loading dock, which is where we sit right now.
Building itself, with the goal of the Preservation Trust is to have a redevelopment of the building as a historic asset for continuous use. So the Preservation Trust of Vermont works in historic preservation, but through the lens of adaptive reuse of historic assets as true community assets, right? So we expect the building will continue to have a really strong life with light industrial on the ground floor and the museum upstairs. We'll probably see a lot more online activities for the museum, delivering exhibits, content, lectures digitally, not just on site. Things have changed so much. We'll probably see a little physical contraction of the museum. It took the whole second floor. Things were kind of spread out, so I expect when it reopens, things will look and feel a little bit different, but of course, the key features, the Hall of Presidents, the exhibit of all the marble slabs from all over the world and what marble is, so looks physically so different from so many places. That'll still be there. Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, that wonderful lobby. But I think it's time, for the museum to go from what it was a gift shop with exhibits because it was attached to a commercial enterprise, and really become primarily a education resource in the future. And I think that's a transition that takes 10 years or so, and that we're in the middle of.